Hey folks, today we're going to be looking at an Azorius Control build. This is a version that I have tweaked based off of a friend from Discord who shared his build and success he's been having running this up the ladder. He's up in Diamond now with this. So the question is Azorius relevant? I think so. Let's find out. So in the video today, we're going to talk about my version of the build and the reasons why mine is a bit different than his, how you can take that build and some of the maybe non-conventional choices I've made for some of the cards, tweak them to what you're seeing on the ladder, what you're playing against, if you're doing it for fun, just how you might tweak it, some of the options that are out there. And number one, is it relevant and could it be competitive? Two, does it actually perform decently, which kind of relates to number one but is a bit different. And then number three, is it fun? If you like Control, is it fun? Is it effective? Throughout the video, we will again build, explain, and then we have our matches. During the matches, we are going to take a look at how we're playing Control, why we're playing certain things in a certain manner, from priority standpoint, from a decision standpoint, why we are doing certain things in a certain way at certain times. Control is a very difficult archetype to learn or master or anything, and to get better at it you have to practice. However, it always helps to have others who have played it for a long time, like myself, kind of explain the thought process behind how they approach it. So everyone may approach Control different. This is my general approach and how I think about Control. So that's what you will kind of get a window into today. You will see how I am thinking about the match, why I am playing certain things the way I'm playing them, and my plan during and then after the match, when we kind of do a triage after the game, the mental aspect of the game picture and game state. And we will cover how that kind of shakes out, how that is manifest into reality, as it were. So after the matches, then we'll kind of go into final thoughts and take another look at the deck to see what you might change to fit your playstyle a little better, or different matches you're finding on the ladder. The whole point of this game is to learn, have fun, be social. So find friends. There's plenty of us out there, Discord, Reddit, all sorts of places. So find people, share the game with, share your passion, discuss it, learn while you're playing, after you're playing. Always learn. It's not really about individual wins and losses. You're going to play tons of games. It's not about every single one game. It's about, as a whole, are you learning? Are you improving? And hopefully we're helping you get some improvement for your game and become a better Control player. So have a good one. Enjoy the video. What's been going on with Azorius in Standard? Well, Midnight Hunt has dropped, as you know. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the new archetypes that have already taken shape. So where is Azorius and white kind of base Control? It so far has been struggling a bit. There are variants that are actually doing pretty well. One of my friends on Discord has been running a list very similar to this. His list is a bit different than this. I I took his list and have modified it slightly based on the matchups I was getting in particular. And as always, I want to point out, whenever you have a list, pay attention to what you're playing, how you're playing, what your deck is doing, what you're coming up against. You can adjust based on what you're seeing, as I kind of had to do based on the types of matches, the way people have been playing versus me. Also, he currently is in Diamond, I'm in Platinum, so the matchups I'm getting are a bit different. The deck compositions, the way people are playing are a bit different. Take a note of, again, how you're doing, what you're coming up against, and don't be afraid to tweak certain things that make more sense to where you're playing and how you're playing. So with that, from an overall standpoint, what kinds of tools do we have in Azorius Control now? Obviously, Yorion is gone, Dream Trawler, two of kind of the bigger components of what was thought of as blue-white control in recent metagames, along with things like Archon, right? Enchantment-based Breath of Melodus actually is quite a big hit for white control. So there are a few key components that, with being removed from the format and the metagame, have changed the face of blue-white control, and there have been some variants thrown out by different creators and on various websites, and they've met different degrees of success. One of the most common critiques of the blue-white control lists so far is there is not a consistent win condition, mostly falling down to either just hoping to mill out your opponent through looping effects using like Devious Cover Up, and in some of the other variations, Teferi, the new Teferi Planeswalker, or coming down to all of Storm Giants and just winning through man-land interaction. And those are generally valid criticisms. However, that's not really uncommon for a very traditional blue-white control setup. In a control setup like this, and when this is the type of control that is being presented, it's not uncommon to only have a couple key creatures or kill switches, whatever that particular kill switch is that you have presented. And the entire rest of the deck is built around establishing your lock and dominance over the game. And once you have established that dominance, you enact your final game plan. So it could be Imri in this case, all the Storm Giants, a Teferi loop where you're just going to mill your opponent down, whatever that is. That's actually a very traditional approach to blue-white control. Completely lock the game, and once you have that dominance established and there is no escape, if the opponent is still willing to play, then you finish it. One of the new tools white has been given, interestingly, is Fateful Absence. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Its controller investigates. It's an instant. Excellent. 1 and a white. And the opponent gets a clue token. So they have to pay 2, then they sacrifice the artifact, and they can draw a card. So this is kind of comparable to Baleful Mastery in that we give the opponent theoretical card advantage. I mean, technically we are giving them card advantage, but the quality of that card is unknown. It could be immensely helpful or completely useless. So it's theoretical advantage as far as actual game state when they're using it. The fact that we have this available is very good. Recently, white has not had many good direct straight up removal spells, and having Fateful Absence is a very big addition to making sure control like this can even work in the first place. there are a lot of threats that we need to deal with outside of sorcery speed, right? Our sweepers, Doomscar, Devastating Mastery, Undo Inversion, these are all sorceries. We can only use these on our turn, during a main phase, not in response to anything, just kind of like a bus. We're coming down the street, and once we get going, there's no stopping. You can see us coming a mile away. Fateful Absence, this is our scalpel, right? We are selectively removing very key things when we want to do it at the time that hopefully is most appropriate for us to maximize our advantage and control position. Having that ability where there's no qualifier, like Expel, right? So that's another recent white removal, 2 and a white. Exile target tapped creature. So it's exile, technically better than destroy. However, it has to be tapped in the first place, which may be difficult depending on what's going on, and it does not remove planeswalkers. Fateful Absence, no qualifier, no restriction beyond just creature or planeswalker, straight up removal. So that's very helpful. That gives us kind of the removal scalpel we need as the foil to our big bus of sweepers here in Doomscar, which pretty known quantity at this point. Destroy all creatures. 3 to white, foretell it for 1 into white. Devastating Mastery. So there's 2 of these and 2 Undo Inversion. So the Devastating Mastery is very helpful because both this and Undo Inversion are destroy all non-land permanents, meaning it will get rid of things like Esika's Chariot, tokens, enchantments, other artifacts, planeswalkers, whatever, whole board state wiped away. Devastating Mastery is expensive from a color standpoint, right? So it's 2 and 4 white. The 4 white can be problematic to cast. So it has the, like every other mastery from the Strixhaven set, it has a reduced student cost you can pay, 2 and 2 white, but this one's pretty harsh. The benefit for the opponent is that they can choose 2 non-land permanents they control and return them to their hand before we destroy all non-land permanents. So if we have no choice but to use that reduced cost, and the only things they have are kind of big bad threats, the bounce effect may buy us some time to recoup and hopefully reestablish our control, or it may do absolutely nothing and be kind of effectively dead. Or in other circumstances, we can pay the student cost because the opponent has nothing but tokens on board. And even if they bounce 2 tokens when bounced will just vanish. So that's fine. Who cares? So there are situations where that can hurt us, situations where it doesn't really matter. However, overall, being able to destroy everything that's in play aside from land is very nice. Then we have the straight up Undo Inversion card, which is just 6 and 2 white. So there's no 4 white requirement here, but there's no discounted option either. It's just 6 and 2 white. Destroy all non-land permanents, or you can play it as a tap land, which sometimes you might need to, and it's nice having an additional technical land source in the deck. So that's good. So that makes up our sweeper core. So we have eight total sweepers of various kinds. Then we have the 3 direct removal. And what do we have for counters? Well, we have Devious Cover-Up, one of the new additions. 2 and 2 blue, counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into the owner's graveyard. So that already is awesome. There's tons of flashback, disturb, graveyard recursion, reanimation stuff going on. So the ability to exile versus put into the graveyard. So then the rest of the card, you may shuffle up to 4 target cards from your graveyard into your library, and that's any card. So you can shuffle a different copy of Devious Cover-Up back in. You can shuffle lands, spells, creatures, enchantments, whatever, right? So whatever is in your graveyard, you can shuffle it back into your library. And as mentioned before, this can affect a loop combo of sorts where you can counter an opponent's spell, shuffle a Devious Cover-Up back into your library, and then if you're effectively at like a mill point where you're about to deck yourself near the end of a game, you just keep kind of looping the Devious Cover-Ups to reshuffle other copies of Devious Cover-Up and other cards to ensure your graveyard and library are repopulating each other. So that way you can continue to have a deck to draw through, and your opponent will not, and they will draw out and deck themselves. So that can be a form of kill condition. This particular variant of the deck is not playing into that. However, being able to use this to exile something and then get back counter capital, removal capital, if opponents have killed some of our kind of finisher threats like Hall of the Storm Giants, Emery, stuff like that, bring them back into our library, draw back into them. That's very good for us. Saw it coming. Anti-cognition, disdainful stroke, test of talents. That rounds out our counter core. So one of the counters that I like at the moment, and is not a normal choice, I would say, and something that has been a little criticized by some, is anti-cognition. The comparison or normal choice people are saying should be in place of this, or that people would think of first right now, is this one here, Reject. So Reject, 1 and a blue, counter target creature or planeswalker spell unless its controller pays 3. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into the owner's graveyard. So straight up, the primary differences are anti-cognition taxes for 2, reject taxes for 3, reject exiles, anti-cognition will never exile a card. So why do I prefer anti-cognition over reject? The main reason is right now, once you get to 8 or more cards, so mid to late game, and the opponent's graveyard, it's a straight up counter. So there's no more tax effect, and we get the scry. Overall, scrying can be quite overrated, but in a deck like ours, where scrying and draw effects are more of a premium in Smine Tome, that in particular was a big one. The ability to have a straight counter later in the game that can also give us a little scry ability that we pair with something like Consider, a draw spell for cheap, can be quite powerful. And the difference between a tax of 2 and 3 earlier in the game, well, right now, from what I've seen, most green, Gruul, mono white, most of those decks are pretty much playing to mana cap at almost every turn through turns 4, around 4 or 5. So normally the difference between attacks of 2 and 3, that being 1, so 1 extra mana, has not come into play, meaning I'm still able to counter the same things that I would need or want to counter between anti-cognition and reject, earlier in the game, and then later, reject is almost always useless, whereas anti-cognition scales with the game state. So once we get to a mid and late game point, unless the opponent is self-milling and like removing their graveyard for some reason or somehow, there's pretty much no game I've run into so far where that's been the case. So they're almost always going to have 8 cards in their graveyard at some point, and once that happens, this becomes again a straight counter. No more tax effect, it will just counter. Then we have Disdainful Stroke, Test of Talents. Right now, there is really no reason not to be running Test of Talents in the deck. I have essentially needed to use this on many occasions, specifically to get rid of things like Devious Cover-Up. In the previous rotation, the previous standard, it was, for the most part, not a very good card to run. Now it's kind of necessary in a control deck. If you're not running at least 1 or 2 of these, you should be, in my opinion. And then we have Thought Coming, 1 copy, just straight up counter, no frills. It has foretell, you can foretell it, and then it's 1 in a blue, and that's it, just a straight counter. And then we have Divide by Zero, which is really not a counter spell, although a lot of people think of it like one. It's not. It's a bounce spell. You're bouncing either spells that are in flight, so ones that your opponents are trying to cast, you bounce that back to their hand, or bouncing spells that you are in the middle of casting, you bounce that to your hand, right? So the flip example of Test of Talents, if your opponent is using that on you and you don't want to lose your Devious Cover-Up, for example, well, you could Divide by Zero and bounce it back to your own hand and not lose it. And it gives us access to a lesson board, pretty standard in general. Environmental Sciences, Reduced Memory, Teachings of the Archaics, Introduction to Prophecy, a little extra card draw, and Mascot. Then we have Consider, which we looked at earlier. Look at the top card of your library, you may put that into your graveyard, draw a card. So it's kind of like Opt. Instead of scrying, we are potentially putting things in our graveyard, which may or may not help us. Fading Hope. Return target creature to its owner's hand. If its mana value was 3 or less, scry 1. This one, for the most part, I really like. It can be tricky to use, though. You may want to just start bouncing the first thing that an opponent casts and lands on board. That very often is not the correct play. So the best ways to use this are to try to time points where your opponent is about to make a mana or game state jump. So if they, for example, have just played Kalane and it's turn 2, they have 2 land and a treasure, they have Kalane on board. You have 2 options. You could bounce the Kalane, and even if they get the 3rd land, so they have 4 total, they could play the Immerstrom, likely, next turn, but they will not get any benefit. The risk bouncing Kalane there is, if you do that, when they replay Kalane, which is pretty likely at that point, now they have 2 treasure and 3 land. They could play a Goldspan and have that even larger on the following turn. So if instead you let the Kalane sit, wait for them to tap out with the Immerstrom, they play out the Immerstrom, then you bounce the Immerstrom. You let it come into play, then you bounce it. If they're unable to get the 4th land, which is a gamble, 1, they can't play Immerstrom back out immediately. 2, they have to play Immerstrom back out. They don't get to tack in with it next turn. So that's the kind of way you should be thinking about using this. How am I going to maximize hurting the opponent's tempo? If they're playing out, if they're playing a green list and they just played their, if they're playing a green list and they just played Prosperous Innkeeper and Jaspera Sentinel, bounce the Jaspera Sentinel. Who cares about the Prosperous Innkeeper? You want to limit the mana. If they have been able to just play 2 of those in one turn, that means they had at least 3 mana to start with. Now they're at Wrenn territory. You need to stifle as much mana as you can. So the whole point of Fading Hope is disrupt tempo. How can you disrupt tempo for the opponent as much as possible in the early game? And then in the late game, how do you remove the key targets that are going to make it more difficult for them to continue playing and enacting their game plan? The more you can disrupt that tempo and that line of thought, the more they have to keep rethinking about, okay, well, I was going to do that, but now I can't do that. So, but I wanted to do that one, and then it starts getting confusing and more confusing because they have to react to what you're doing. Their line of thought is gone. Things get more confusing. The mana that they have to spend, more difficult. So you want to disrupt tempo. This is an excellent way to do it. It's very deceptive because of how inexpensive it is. And it's just bouncing creatures, right? How can that be so disruptive to the game? If you're targeting it well, this can be the difference between you taking over a game and completely frustrating an opponent so thoroughly that they just don't know what to do anymore. They can't keep track of what they're doing, or losing. That's how important a card like this can be if you get it, and depending on how the game is going, you're using it well, it can be that impactful to a game. Because control is about control. If we are controlling the tempo, we're in control, we're dictating the terms of the game. The opponent is playing the game we want. They're playing how we want, when we want. Can I play this creature? No. That's back in your hand. Okay. Well, can I play? Nope, can't play that either. Back to your hand, counter, etc. That's what we want to be doing. We're dictating. We want Faithful Mending. I'm still iffy on this one. My friend from Discord really doesn't like this card at all. I don't really blame him. It's not a very good card, but for the price being instant, there are 2 things I have found so far in the tier and types of games I've been playing. I lose a lot of life very, very rapidly. And if I can get to a point where I stabilize, I often still need to gain a little bit of life to withstand stuff like Meathook Massacre. If I'm able to stabilize and they only have like 2 creatures left, but I'm at 2 life, they can Meathook and then I'm dead. So having the ability to gain a little bit of life has saved me several games so far. The draw 2 is great. The discard 2 is it's terrible. It's really bad most of the time. I mean, it's almost never good in this kind of deck. There's really nothing we're using that takes advantage of discarding cards. However, the life gain plus draw 2 can be the difference. So for now, it's in the deck as a draw and life gain option rolled into 1. Instant speed, 1 and a blue, and then it flashes back so you can do it again. So technically we can gain up to 8 life between those 2 cards. Then we have Memory Deluge. So 2 blue. Instant, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the amount of mana spent. put 2 of them into your hand, rest on the bottom, flashback for 5 and 2 blue. So for finish, then we have Emery, ward for 4, 5/5 flyer, dragon. If he deals damage to a player, draw a card. If we have fewer than 3 cards in hand, we can draw cards equal to the difference. That can be amazing from the card draw aspect. Ward 4, very expensive to get through. Alrund's Epiphany, kind of goes without saying. It's extra turn spell. Gives us 2 birds. You can foretell it. It knocks 1 off the cost, which is 5 and 2 blue. So it's 4 and 2 blue with foretell. Pretty simple. And then Hollow Storm Giants. So 2 of those. Activate it for 5 in blue. Becomes a 7/7 with ward 3. The ward, again, super important. So that's pretty much the deck. You'll notice this particular version is 61 of 60 cards. I have an extra card in here, and I'm keeping the land at 24. So I have 61 total. It has been working fine. But that is why it is 61 of 60. So with that, let's take this for a spin, shall we? Okay, let's see what we get paired up with here. Balderdash, Baldur's Gate. Okay, that's not terrible. We'll start with the ball. Pass turn. Okay. Let's consider our options here. We do not want that in the graveyard. Cool. Go with a white. Foretell our Doomscar. Huh. Interesting. We're listening to that part of the overview and just gave that example. Kalane. And Fading Hope, and how we might choose to interact with these cards here. Okay, that's good that they only had a tap land here. So hopefully they play... Okay, that's fine. They can take our Emery. We will wipe their board. Okay. Yeah. So now if they have an Immerstrom, playing it would be dangerous for them. They can play a Goldspan, obviously. Going for the Immerstrom anyway. Alright. Okay, so 2, 3. I think we're going to just bounce it. Keep the tempo on our side. And then we're gonna pump fake like we have a counter here. Alright. It would be excellent if they go for that land and then use their treasure to cast that Immerstrom. Ooh, beautiful. Sure. Goodbye. Goodbye to that one. Let's see. Play the Ondu as the land here. So we can have Devastating Mastery up if we need it. And let's bring out our Imri, which makes it less likely to them that we would Devastating Mastery. But okay, that's good. We want to keep creatures off of their board. So I think testing this is a good idea. Okay. So we get to see what's in their hand. That blood is not good for us. However, if they just recur Immerstrom, we can just kill it. Okay. So we could go for the attack here, but I'd kind of rather hold these up for actual counter. So if they go for like another Immerstrom or Goldspan here, I'd like to be able to get rid of those. Like that's a pretty good one to get rid of. Okay, foretell that. No, definitely gonna get rid of that. Let's get back a test. Memory. Devastating. Anti-cognition. There you go. Alright, opponent has had enough. So, where did it start going wrong for the opponent? It started going wrong when we bounced this back to the opponent's hand and started taking control of dictating when the opponent could do their game plan, which was you can't. You can only do things when we want you to, and that's going to lead you directly into our trap. And that is not a good trap. So even though they had more cards in hand at this point, technically, one, and they had better technical threats left, right? They have two threats on board. We only have the one Hall of Storm Giants in play, and now we have no hand. However, we have exiled their Lolth. We've made it clear that getting these things back, we're just going to keep wrecking board state, bouncing things, we're going to dictate when and where you can do things. So it wasn't really going to matter what they were doing. We were taking control, we were getting things back into our library. We've established tempo control and game state control from a mindset standpoint. We had already gotten into the opponent's head and said, we own the game. Even though we have no cards left, we're on top deck, right? We have no direct influence at this point over what happens next. They have technically more influence than we do, but we were so far in their game plan that they've given up. That's what we want to do. This is the kind of control that I grew up playing when I would play control. Everything was tempo based, dictating how your opponent plays, when they can play, leading them into the boa constrictor, and then tightening the noose until there's no escape. Mentally, there's no escape. All they can see is, if I play this, it doesn't matter. They're just going to wreck it. They're going to blow it up. They're going to destroy it, bounce it, whatever. And the more recent control variants, I think, kind of, let's bounce that, kind of play into that. Okay. But not at a very high level, let's say. Meaning, like, if we look at Yorian based control, it was more of an inevitable state. You were racing against the opponent's Yorian and them setting up a state conducive enough to take over the game for good. Whereas with one like this, we're sitting back and informing the opponent, yeah, you can do that. No, you can't do that. We're dictating everything. And that's a pretty big difference in mentality for the game. Hopefully we get some answers here. Okay, so opponent obviously is playing Dimir, some kind of recursion deck. Right. So we could mending, wouldn't be very helpful. Just pass the turn and see what happens. Kind of have a long way to go before we can fully cast that. Right now, we would just bounce stuff, which could be helpful, but it's already in their graveyard, right? No, we can't actually cast that. Okay. Can't really do anything about it at the moment. So unfortunately, this game, we're not really able to do much dictating about the terms of the game. So far, anyway. Alright, so let's just kill one of these so we can get double blue rolling. Not looking too good for us. Get rid of that, and the consider, I think. Plop that down. Pass turn. Okay, what you got now? Okay. Okay, we'll play that. Let's see if they have a counter now. They didn't before. Okay. Hmm. For Emery. So with this guy, they can exile stuff from their graveyard and then pay X. Right now, they can't really actually pay X because it can't be 0. But if they could like exile those two and then... So might as well play the land. They could exile this stuff and then make it transform into this guy. So then they buff up that, for example. Then it gets counters based on the amount of things exiled. Okay, because we're gonna like just wreck everything, we want to maximize our blocking here. Okay, that's not unhelpful. Another blue. Like that. There we go. And let's foretell that.
Are you enraptured by my beauty? Aren't I generous?
Okay. Take our turn. Pass. Let's draw some stuff. that and that. We will kill that. We have counter left up. That's good. Pass turn.
I will get what I want.
So our opponent, I mean, if they can kill one of our birds, they can menace that guy in. If they cannot kill one of our birds, then we can block that out. They've drawn with this, so now they can't, even if we do, if he attacks it and we do block, he can't get anything back with that. Okay, interesting. I'm gonna go for a no play. So we could just destroy everything again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We will not have really any protection, so I'd rather not do that right now. I think we'll just let it play and see what happens. We have double counters if he tries to do removals. Counter that.
My hatred lives.
Okay, nothing we can do about that one. Yep. Thankfully, he's effectively tapped out here, so he can't really do anything. So let's draw a whole bunch of stuff. Well, not draw a whole bunch, but get a bunch of stuff. Alright, Devious and a Doomscar. That's perfect. Okay, so go for the undo.
They merely delayed.
Get rid of all of that.
Defeated.
Now that's stuck. Can't cast that.
And a gift in exchange for loyalty.
Okay. Sure. Get rid of all those. Pass turn. And we have our Devious cover-up left. Yep. Definitely want that exiled. Let's get that and a Fateful back, I think. Yeah, I should have gotten 4 back. What are you gonna do? Okay. Alright, let's make him recast that. And we will get a reduced to memory. Let's turn. Mm-hmm. Okay. Take about of that. Last turn. Okay, so we can still test and get our haul up for block if we need to. Okay. So we're just going to make it look like we have more answers than we do. And even though we have multiple things that are holding priority, I still like to manually set it so if in the course of what we're doing we lose those things that are giving us priority, we still have kind of overall set stop points to retain priority there. So if we're not just kind of in the heat of the moment, kind of forget, it still makes it look like we're and we have things we're working on and we're cooking. See if we can dig up something helpful. Take those. Let's see how much our opponent taps for here. So they're probably trying to decide whether they want to go all in or not, because they're going to want to be able to get that Dracolich back. I would be surprised if they don't attack here. Okay. So they're going to try to do that then. If I sweep. So in that case, let's get one of those and a Fateful Absence. Okay, cool. Bring down another hall. Attack with Emery. Cool. Doomscar. End turn. Counter. Actually, we'll keep that there just in case they suddenly start getting man lands like crazy. Alright, there we go. Opponent number 2 has had enough. So this one, we looked to be in a pretty bad spot. It started turning around with exiled it with our first faithful mending, the extra 2 life, and some of the cards we got there that really gave us a foot back in the door. And then we started taking advantage of good tempo plays, removing the right things at the right time, keeping the right mana open, and showing enough removal and counter, and understanding how the opponent's cards work to ensure that they could not get the advantage over us, even though we were at a much weaker life position than they were, obviously, until recently. So we were able to use those factors in our knowledge to take over the game and establish that it didn't matter really what they were doing, we were going to answer it. So that is our take on Azorius Control, this version having already been tuned and tweaked by my friend on Discord. I'll have both versions in the description, so you can pick and choose which one you want to take a look at. Again, this one has been kind of tuned one for the matchups I've been seeing, and also just how I like to play Control. If you don't prefer playing quite so obliquely, you can go more straight up on some of the counter interaction, like switching out anti-cognition for just sought coming. If you don't like having so much, don't like having things like mending in there. So if we just jump back real quick here. So if you prefer, for example, not having mending, if that discard is too much for you, you could go with Revitalize instead, right? So you don't draw as much, but you gain 3 life versus 2, no flashback, but still an instant. Again, anti-cognition you could swap out for reject. You could re-up the sought coming count. So there are different ways to kind of tune this to fit the type of control you're comfortable playing, the types of matchups you're seeing more often. Maybe the amount of draw is too much. You're getting like memory deluge too often. So you might want to cut down on one of those and up your Fateful Absence count, for example. So just depending on what you're seeing, tweak it, right? None of these decks are set in stone. Nothing that you get from a video or other content creator or net decking, none of it is set in stone. For the most part, if you're getting something off like a tier list, it should be a relatively known commodity and solid deck. However, if you're running into certain things and it makes sense to swap certain cards around or adjust your numbers, play around with it. See if that helps you get past maybe a stump you're kind of running into at a certain tier point. And if you're just playing for fun, take a deck and do whatever you want to it, right? Make sure you're having fun. Don't get the ladder anxiety. Don't look at it and don't fall into the trap, right? Don't fall into looking at it and feeling like you have to do a million games, and if you're not climbing, then you're not good. That's not true. Have fun, learn, winning or losing, learn. Ultimately, Magic is a social game. This isn't exactly a social environment, so find people that you can talk to and enjoy the game, discuss things about. You're playing it, so obviously you find it fun. Find people to share that with and learn. It's not about the individual wins and losses. It's about how you pay attention, how you grow, how you enjoy the experience. And if you are too focused on just the wins and losses, you're gonna burn out. You're not gonna have fun with it. So, in summary, I like this deck. I think actually this is relatively competitive overall. The different versions are kind of fitting at different levels and different types of matchups. So again, find the one that is working for you or you like the most, you can play with the best, and go at it. These are solid lists. I don't think Azorius Control is dead or gone. It's a little hidden, I think, behind some of the flashier options, so to speak. But it is still a very strong deck, and with good pilots, which anyone can be if you want to spend some time and learn it. It's a very strong deck, very strong archetype. So have fun. If you're enjoying these videos, please leave a like. Appreciate your support and help. Any comments, questions, anything you guys want to hear, decks you want to take a look at, ideas, please leave comments, reach out, let me know what you're thinking, and we'll be happy to kind of dissect and play around with whatever you guys have. So, turns out that control games make for some pretty long matches. If you want to check out the mostly unedited remaining matches, you can check them out over here. Otherwise, catch you later.